At number 9 on the Iconic 100 list is the 1989 Upper Deck Ken Griffey Jr. rookie card. And here to talk with us today about this card is Ryan, Brooklyn Vintage Cards on Instagram. Ryan, I'm going to be honest, man, as a basketball card collector, but as a guy who grew up in the 80s and in the early 90s, this card to me is a card that seems like it's too low. You know, I have this card actually at number 4 on the all-time iconic list. Where did you have it?
I think I had it at 2, and I might even have had it at 1. But it is for people of our age, and maybe we have like vintage bias and age bias here. This card defined an era of collecting. This is 1989 Upper Deck, right? Ken Griffey Jr. He's a rookie. He's just made it up to the majors after 1 or 2 years, successful years in the minors. His father is a Hall of Famer. We've all heard of this kid. I mean, I was a little kid, and he was 19 years old, whatever he was. He's number 1 in the set, and it's not just the next year's top set. It's Upper Deck. It's the first year of Upper Deck cards. There's a hologram on the back. It just blew my mind. Why they put silver on the back of a card? Are you kidding me? And then the guy they chose to introduce the product with is Ken Griffey Jr. We'll talk about the image in a second. To me, the image of a card is a huge part of its iconicness score, and it's this awesome portrait of a young Ken Griffey Jr. But he goes on to have this career where he's not just a great player, but he's the kid. He's Ken Griffey Jr., the kid. He's the archetype for all of the baseball games that we liked playing, the video games. And he's Ken Griffey Jr., and it's this really cool rookie card. And now back to the image. He's got this hat on his giant head of hair, huge smile, gold chain, and then inexplicably, and I've never understood this, a dark blue turtleneck. What was he wearing the turtleneck for? I don't get it, but it doesn't take away from the card's iconicness.
Yeah, I have to say, what you talked about, I forget what you called it, but vintage bias, and I think you're talking about like a vintage, like a year or an era. And
no, I'm saying we're old.
Okay, well, that's where I was going to get to as well. Yeah. I see this coming at 9, and I'm like, yeah, I think you got it wrong, guys. I think that this is too low, because this is like, there's very few cards that like usher in an entire brand that are synonymous with an era, that are the card for an era. And even all these years later, you look back and you go, yeah, that's the card of the era. In fact, if I say the year 1989, this is the card that comes to your mind. It's not worth a ton, right? And that's because they made thousands and thousands and thousands of these cards.
Oh, millions. I checked earlier. 89,000 have been graded by PSA. Forget about the other grading companies, all of which are terrific. So 89,000.
We're talking about well into the 6 figures of these have been graded. And that's, that makes Zion Prism and Luca Prism cards cheapish. Like that's a huge number, Ryan. And so I get that it's not worth a ton, but again, how much a card is worth does not relate to how iconic it is. And there's a couple of cards that are coming up on the list, and I'm not saying anything to disparage them, because they are ultra recognizable from a different era, but like, they're not as iconic as this card is, in my opinion. They're just not. And so I'm going to stand by my vote of 4. I still feel like this is the number 4 most iconic card, but that's why we do this, asking a lot of people and getting a lot of thoughts. And 9 is still a great placement, especially for a card that you can find for double figures. Is there anything else you want to say about this card?
It's a great card. If you've got what you think of as a robust collection, you might as well pick one up. It's not too expensive. It's a great card to have.
Let me add too, and I said this about a lot of cards also on the list so far. I love the cards on the list that you can find that are relatively cheap and low grades, but that there's a version that's very high end. This card only has one version, but what we started to see over the course of the last 5 years, especially, is a lot of people are getting high grade copies of this signed. And if you get a perfect autograph on this card on a really high end or high grade version, and then get that thing slabbed, PSA DNA or through Beckett, that's a really cool card to have in your collection.
I hadn't seen that, because Griffey's signature, it's so sweet. I mean, and it's consistent, and it's well done. It's like his swing.
Yep. Griffey's got the MJ signature of baseball, I would argue. And so that's one for anybody to check out who's looking to get into something that's high end and iconic. Well, we're into the top 10, obviously. Ryan, I want to thank you for joining us for all the videos that you've joined us on over the course of the last couple of months. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and to hear your thoughts on some of these iconic cards. And who knows, maybe we'll do this in a couple of years and have you back again.
Thanks, Adam.
Appreciate it. Until next time, guys, happy collecting.